In today's video, we're continuing on with our NHL season preview for the upcoming 23-24 season. Today, we continue our run through the Atlantic Division. We're looking at the Stanley Cup finalists, Florida Panthers. Will they be able to continue on where they left off last year? Will they take a step back? Did they overachieve? We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the Florida Panthers upcoming season. We're going to preview what we expect to happen. But first, in case you're new to the series, essentially what we're going to do first is we're going to take a look at last year, take a look at their record, where they finish, who are the top scorers, take a look at their playoff history, cap situation, how the team has changed, and then we'll get into what things look like for the upcoming year and what we expect to find out and see. So let's start first with recapping last year. So the Florida Panthers just barely squeaked into the playoffs, had 92 points with a record of 42, 32, and 8. They had some help. The Pittsburgh Penguins kind of dropped the ball late in the season with their last game against the Chicago Blackhawks, which they should have won, and they dropped that game, and Florida gets in. So they kind of had a little bit of luck on their side and a little bit of help. But as we can see, the whole expression, just get in and anything can happen, was certainly true for Florida last year. They scored 290 goals, which was 6th highest in the league, so they certainly had no problem offensively all year. Goals against was not fantastic. They allowed 273 for 21st. The power play was in the top 10, 22.8%. And the PK was not great, 78%, 23rd. So not the most horrific either. But certainly, offensively, as you can see, they were built to score, had trouble keeping the puck out of their net. The blue line, to me, was the biggest concern going into last year for Florida. It's probably going to be again this year. And, of course, with goaltending not being as consistent as we saw in the playoffs, that kind of explains, I think, why they had the stats that they did. They were led offensively. The top scorers were Matthew Tkachuk, who had a Hart Trophy type season, 109 points. Certainly a big year for him, his first year in Florida after the big trade last offseason. Captain Sasha Barkov had 78 points, and he was the next highest. So there was a big gap there between Tkachuk and everybody else. Carter Verhaeghe had a strong year, 73. Brandon Montour really broke out offensively as well at 73 points. And Sam Reinhart, still a key contributor as well, at 67 points. So, as I mentioned, they had pretty good depth scoring. That was pretty good. They got more from the back end, especially with the emergence of Montour last year. And that played a big role in their success. But by far, the weaker part of the team was goaltending and defense. For the playoffs, they've made the playoffs for the last 3 consecutive seasons. And they hope to make that 4 going into the upcoming year. Of course, last year, like I said, they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final and lost, unfortunately, to the Vegas Golden Knights. It was actually a fairly lopsided final, too, where Vegas won quite handily, but Florida certainly disposed of some of their opponents in the Eastern Conference the same way, on their way to the Stanley Cup final. Now, right now, if you look at their cap situation, courtesy of CapFriendly.com, you can look at this in 2 ways. One that shows technically, and it's a technicality here, they have $9.8 million available, but that's through their LTIR pool. Now, ideally, they don't want to have to use that. The main reason they even have it in the first place is because they have some serious injuries to Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour, who are not going to be ready to start the season. I believe Montour is looking like probably coming back sometime in November, and Ekblad could be closer to Christmas, maybe the early part of January. So they're both pretty serious and significant. Matthew Tkachuk had a pretty serious injury to finish out the playoffs the last few games in Vegas as well, and he apparently will be ready for training camp. Now, his was a little bit of a different scenario, so he was a little bit more fortunate that he had a better, faster recovery. But being $9.8 million available in LTIR is one thing, but it's not like they're going to have the LTIR all season. These guys are coming back. It's they can't rely on that too much. You could also look at it that they're technically just shy of $1.2 million over the cap, and they're allowed to be right now because of the LTIR. So right now they could choose not to be. They can trim the roster down. They do have on Cap Friendly, they have extra forward and defenseman here that could certainly be dropped down to the minors and create some more space, so that's a possibility. So Florida can be cap compliant without the LTIR pool to start the year. That's a real possible scenario we might see, and it's probably something Bill Zito's going to want to do so they accrue more space for potential later in the season deadline acquisitions. Now let's take a look at how the team has changed over the course of this offseason. Take a look at the additions and subtractions. Let's start first with players who are no longer with the club that were Florida Panthers last year. Anthony Duclair was traded to the San Jose Sharks, so he's not there. That was basically a cost-cutting move. Patrick Hornqvist retired, so he's gone. Radko Gudas ended up signing as a UFA with the Anaheim Ducks. Eric and Mark Stahl, the Stahl brothers, are not there any longer. Mark Stahl's re-signed elsewhere. Eric Stahl has not. Colin White was not re-upped. I mean, he was picked up last year in a one-year deal after being bought out by the Senators. He's going to training camp with Pittsburgh on a PTO. And Alex Lyon also was not retained as well. He left also as a UFA. So Alex Lyon played a big role for them last year. Clearly, especially when Spencer Knight had to leave the team. And obviously he was in the assistance program, which for personal reasons for a big chunk there of time, and wasn't with the team through the end of the year and into the playoffs. And Alex Lyon filled in admirably and played a huge role. This year's new Florida Panthers include Evan Rodriguez, who comes over from the Avalanche, Anthony Stolarz, who will kind of replace and hopefully do what Alex Lyon did for them. He was previously in Anaheim. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who was bought out in Vancouver, signed a much cheaper deal here in Florida. And then Mike Riley was let go in Boston. He wasn't retained. Of course, he was in the minors to finish out the end of his contract there. And Nico Mikkola as well, no longer with the club either. So at the end of the day, Nico Mikkola signed as well in Florida after finishing up the season with the Rangers after being acquired by from the St. Louis Blues last year. So knowing that Montour and Ekblad are going to be out to start the year, they certainly wanted to try to beef up the blue line a little bit and add some extra help. Ekman-Larsson will play a role with that. I mean, he's not what he was, what he was sought to be with his last contract and all the expectations. But I think in a place like Florida on a new contract, making far less money, I would think he might kind of have a little bit of a sense of relief and you might see a different player. At least that's the hope and expectation. I don't think anybody expects him to be Montour or Ekblad, but if he can be a second, third pair guy and contribute, that's all they're looking for. Riley's a good skater. You're not going to get a ton of stealth defense, but he can move the puck and he can skate well. Mikkola's got the size, so they get a little bit of everything there with those three defensemen that came in, but that's some big holes left there from Montour and Ekblad, so hard to say for sure. As far as any prospects go that we could see make an impact on this roster this year, I don't know that there really are any per se. I mean, I know Gregory Denisenko is hoping to break through and play more this year at the NHL level, so he might be a player to watch. Mackie Samoskevich as well is another prospect. I don't know if he's going to get NHL time this year or not, but certainly a player that we want to keep our eye on because he could be a decent player for this Panther team down the road. As far as looking at some bounce back and breakthrough candidate players here, looking at bounce back, I would say that the goaltending duo of Spencer Knight and Sergei Bobrovsky both kind of qualify here. Of course, Spencer Knight's looking to bounce back and get everything back going strong again after, like I said, missing a stretch of time. Now, he's not bouncing back because of poor play, but obviously whatever he was dealing with and all his off-ice stuff that he obviously went through the assistance program for, well, hopefully everything's in line, under control, and he's in a much better spot and can resume his career and bounce back to being a strong goaltender for them. With Sergei Bobrovsky, which goalie are you going to get, right? Are you going to get playoff Bob that showed up last year and was amazing? Or are you going to get regular season Bob that they've had for the past couple of years who's been highly overpaid and terribly inconsistent? That's the thing. You got to hope he bounces back and can show you what he did in the playoffs more consistently. As far as breakthrough players go, I would suggest maybe a player like Anton Lundell might be a guy to watch for a big step forward in their development this year as well. As far as looking at their potential projected lineup, this is courtesy of dailyfaceoff.com. Again, this is just a snapshot. It's not a for sure place on how they're going to line up their players, but it's a possibility here that you could see Barkov with Reinhart and Rodriguez, and then the second line looks like it could be Bennett with Tkachuk and Verhaeghe. Of course, they played a lot together last year as well. So your third line right now is projected to be Lundell, Luostarinen, as well as Denisenko. Your fourth line right now projects to be Lorentz, Lomberg, and Cousins possibly. So we'll see. I mean, obviously the Panthers could go with some different options here. They also have Kevin Stenlund around, who could be your Your 12th, 13th forward might factor in there too. On the back end, you've got your 6 defensemen are going to be Forsling and Mahura, Ekman Larsson and Kulikov, Mikkola and Riley. So obviously, these guys are all, NHL quality defensemen for the most part, but having Ekblad and Montour out is going to be an absolutely huge blow. There is no doubt. Your goaltending duo will be Bobrovsky and Knight, with, of course, Stolarz playing the role of the number 3 guy. While Ekblad and Montour are out, that's not a great looking decor, to be honest. So I do wonder if they might have a slow start to the season. That's going to be, I think, an interesting part of Florida's schedule and season to watch. As far as like what questions are facing this franchise and what's going to happen, well, like I said before, goaltending is which Bobrovsky are we getting? Are we getting playoff or regular season Bob? That's going to be such a huge difference. I mean, he came through for them hardcore in the playoffs last year. Can he do that throughout an 82-game schedule? It's been a while and a few years since he's shown the signs that he can. So, if he goes back to what he was been in the regular season during his time as a Panther, and you combine that with a couple of their 2 top defensemen being out and their lack of ability to maybe move the puck, I can see them maybe struggling to start the year. It's going to be challenging. I know I've seen some projections showing them being, first or second in the division, and I've seen some have them as low as anywhere from 4th to like 6th. Some in a wild card spot, some missing the playoffs altogether. There seems to be a huge variety of opinion out there on this Panthers team and what they're going to be able to accomplish this year. I have no doubt they've learned a lot of long lessons in the playoffs last year, and I'm sure they're going to come in to the season with a good attitude and believing in themselves, because a lot of them, might not have thought this team was capable of what they accomplished last year. Now they know they are, and of course some of the changes they made are, not significant in a sense. Like, it's largely the same group. I mean, you take away in the forward group, like Hornqvist wasn't really a regular, so you take away like Duclair and White, but you put in Rodriguez, for example, and give Denisenko more time. Like, that's not really much of a downgrade. And on the back end, it's because of the injuries, right? You take away Stahl, you take away Gudis, and then you take away, obviously, Ekblad and Montour for a little while because of the injuries, and it gets challenging for sure. But to me, their back end is going to be by far the biggest question mark. Can they defend? Can they handle other teams' top lines? I don't know that they can. That was going to be a challenge anyway, because Ekblad and Montour are not, especially Montour, he's not exactly, Mr. Defensive Player of the Year. Like, he's a great offensive player. He's kind of like a rover out there in a sense, right? You get to go with the bad with him. You get a lot of great stuff on the offensive side of the puck, but defensively, I'm not saying he's horrendous, but he's not, he's not known for that. Like, you do get mistakes, you do see him caught up ice, but that's what you get with a lot of the top offensive defensemen. You don't want them to not produce that offense, right? So I don't know. That's going to be the big question mark for me. I honestly don't know, because of the inconsistent goaltending we've seen and the blue line, that they can be a top 3 team. I think they'll be one of the teams kind of in a similar spot as last year, battling for a wild card. I mean, you're looking at some of the top 3 in this division. I think it's going to be a little harder to pick this year. I think teams like Toronto and Tampa are a little bit more secure. But then you look at like what's happened to the Bruins, and they've had some major subtractions. And then you got Florida, and then you get teams like Buffalo and Ottawa pushing. I could see maybe Florida and Boston, maybe both being in like wild card type spots, and maybe like Ottawa, Buffalo pushing for that 3 spot. Like, that wouldn't be shocking. That wouldn't be shocking at all. But Florida's got a lot to kind of prove in a way because of the changes. But like I said, it's hard to count them out after what we saw them do last year. So to me, they're definitely going to be in the mix. It's just a matter of how high in the standings can they go. Let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.